From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Wildcast podcast, bi-week edition. Justin Spears here with the man, Michael Lev. We're talking all things Arizona football. We'll be answering your mailbag questions later on in the podcast. And we're coming to you live. Or I wouldn't say live, it's a podcast. But we are coming to you from the Arizona Daily Star studios, Michael Lev.
We
What are
are.
we going to call it?
We are. They're luxurious.
Is it during the football season, it's the Fishbowl Studios?
Sure. We have
Sponsored by
Jetfish.
recorded
this podcast in all kinds of different locations, in McHale Center, outside of McHale Center, various locales in and around Tucson. This is kind of our new home.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty happy about the setup here. You don't have to lug that equipment around all over the place. Also, programming note, only one podcast this week because of the bye, so we'll make it a really good one for you.
I think we could all use a bye week. At least I know I can, because Pac-12 pick'ems the last couple weeks for me have been terrible. I got off to a great start, and it was looking like I was just going to coast to a win, but looks like Ryan Finley might leapfrog me. But I could use the bye week, so I'm glad we're taking some time off.
You were overconfident. I'm sure Ryan Finley's on cloud 9 right now after the
Yeah.
Padres game. He was there.
He was there.
For that comeback on Saturday. That was something.
Yeah.
I know you're a Dodgers fan.
Yeah.
That had to hurt a little bit, but man, what a scene in San Diego.
You can make an argument that it is the biggest collapse in baseball history, or biggest failure, I would say, because I mean, you win how many games? 111. You have this great season. You have your manager Dave Roberts saying that Dodgers are winning the 2022 World Series. Book it. And then you only win one game in the first round. You don't even make it to the NLCS. So I don't know. Okay, we're not going to make this a baseball podcast. But, Lev, you were actually in a city that had playoff baseball in Seattle. That game went, 18 innings? 16 innings or something
18
like that?
innings,
Oh,
1-0.
Two whole baseball games.
Really quick story. I went to the Mariners team store at about 10:15 a.m. on Saturday. Not the team store by the stadium. There's several of them around town. And the store opened at 10. I got there about 10:15, and there was a line outside the store, and they had to sort of ration the customers who could be in there at one single time because it was like packed.
Yeah.
Seattle loves their baseball. I got my younger son a couple items over there. He was really excited about that. He loves Julio Rodriguez. But yeah, so we had a 1-0 baseball game. We had a 49-39 football game that I feel like played out almost exactly the way we all thought it would. We thought it would be a shootout, and it was. We thought Washington would have a little bit too much firepower, and they did. I'm interested to hear your impressions, Justin. You watched the game from here, on TV, a little different perspective. What were your top takeaways?
Yeah, well, one, I was hoping that you were safe first and foremost, because it was a little bit hazy and smoky. I know you were kind of feeling the effects when you were traveling back to Tucson, right?
Yeah, just improving my podcast voice a little bit with some of the bad air up there, but I'm fine. Good to go.
Well, glad to have you back and safe in Tucson. But man, this defense is bad. It is so bad. And I know that Washington has the top passing offense in the Pac-12. Michael Penix is a great quarterback. But man, I really thought Arizona was going to have some sort of, I guess, luck go their way, because you had Jacob Manu step in, and he's what Paul Rhodes, the former Arizona defensive coordinator, would say is sawed off. He is very sawed off. He's a very undersized linebacker. But I was very curious to see how he would do kind of in this new role where it's like, hey, we're putting you ahead of Colby Cage this week. This is not some guy's hurt, so we're going to put you in here. This is you. We think you are the best linebacker to start at this spot. And he came in, had a fourth down stop early on in the first half. Johnny Nansen and the defensive coaching staff were fired up. I don't know if you could see it from your angle at the stadium, Lev, but it was cool to see the coaching staff get really that amped up on the sideline. And then DJ Warnell also had a fourth down stop too. So two guys who step in, really have their first major starts at Arizona, and they made a couple of plays. But that was really the only highlights out of Arizona's defense, because Washington then proceeded to put up 595 yards of total offense. And when you look at just the rest of the games this season, Lev, that's a lot of yards that Arizona's giving up. And I will say this, I want to get your perspective on this. I found it very interesting that Jed Fish said, yeah, while our defense is bad and we are giving up a lot of points and a lot of yards, this is kind of like what we're seeing in college football all across the board. Like you look at the Tennessee-Alabama game. You look at some other games across college football like Michigan and how many yards that they rushed against Penn State. It's not like Arizona is in a class of its own. We're seeing this all across college football. But with that being said, Arizona's defense is bad. There's no other way to put it.
It's an indictment on the front seven that Jacob Manu enters the lineup and he's the best player in that group, right? Certainly the most productive. I think one of the highest graded, according to Pro Football Focus. There's a lot of heat on Johnny Nansen right now from the fan base, and I totally get it. And I think a lot of our questions that we'll get in the mailbag are about that particular topic, so we'll save a little bit of that. But I'm with Hunter Echols, echoing what he said after the game, echoing Echols. He was like, we, the veteran defensive linemen on this team, need to play better. It just felt like they were stuck to blocks that whole game. Could not get to Michael Penix. 0 sacks, only 7 quarterback pressures. Washington was credited with 24 quarterback pressures, and I would say that a less talented or less mobile quarterback than Jaden DeLora might have been sacked 10 times in that game. He was unbelievable.
Those spin moves that he was putting on?
Incredible. The spin moves, the escapability, the pump fakes. It
was very basketball point guard-esque.
I mean, it was a tremendous performance. I can't remember a bad throw he made. Maybe a couple slight overthrows early in the game, but he was really on point. So it's unfortunate that the defense couldn't hold up its end of the bargain. They really got to go to work on, hey, how can we improve in the front? I know, again, a lot of people are going to blame the secondary for all those passing yards, and there were a lot of guys wide open, but you can't ask guys to cover for that long. I mean, Penix was going, you could see it.
He could have a
He could go from his first to his second to his third read almost every single time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's going to got to be a big focus on the bye week. Pass rush moves, getting off blocks, hand usage, all of those things. Maybe making some tweaks schematically, maybe making some tweaks with personnel, but they got to try something.
Yeah.
Because the schedule coming up is absolutely brutal. You've got USC 4:00 kickoff on homecoming. Thank you very much. Followed by road trips to Utah and UCLA. I mean, absolutely brutal stretch coming up. And if the defense plays like it did against Washington, I mean, USC is going to score 70 points.
Yeah.
No exaggeration. So they're going to have to figure out something between now and then.
Yeah. Now, you can also start deploying more linebackers, like just blitzing Jacob Manu every single play, or maybe adding in Eamon Allen. Like we've heard about him all throughout training camp. Where the heck has he been this year for Arizona? He was put on scholarship and was expected to have a big role at linebacker for Arizona. We have not seen him this year. So I'm wondering, does Johnny Nansen really just look into his bag and look at what he's got and say, listen, we need to try something different. And maybe if that's bringing the house with certain linebackers, and so be it, because maybe that'll free up some of the defensive linemen, because I'm really starting to think that teams are, double teaming Keon Bars, or double teaming Tank Wilson and Parrish Shand, and none of the interior guys who got to the quarterback last year, because didn't Keon Bars lead the team in sacks last year? Where the heck has he been? He's not been getting to the quarterback. So a lot of the interior guys that had a solid 2021, they have not taken that next step. And I'm wondering, maybe does Johnny Nansen do some things to get those guys to play better, get off blocks like you said, or do they start adding in linebackers and start getting tricky with blitzes so that way these defensive linemen can finally start to shine?
Yeah, and there's risk-reward with blitzing, right? Because when you blitz, that takes 1 or 2 or even 3 guys out of coverage. So you expose yourself on the back end. Some things that I would definitely play Russell Davis more. And I know that if you do that, maybe that affects Hunter Echols' playing time, or it affects Jalen Harris's playing time. And they do have that third down package where all three of them are on the field at the same time. I just think Russell Davis has special ability that no one else on this team has. He gets in the backfield.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just super quick and fast and slippery, and he's got bend. So I would definitely continue to deploy him in pass rushing situations. Eamon Allen is interesting. I don't think he's really a middle linebacker. They just don't have any other options besides Jerry Roberts on the team, which is probably why he's not playing. It's also a lot of responsibility. But if you had a dime package, maybe, where Eamon Allen could use his safety background as someone in coverage, third and long, that might make some sense. You also give Jerry Roberts a little bit of a rest. I would consider giving Ephesians Prysock some time at cornerback. He's already surpassed that 4-game limit for redshirting. Traden Stukes just does not look like the same player to me as last year.
Yeah.
He had a really good, I think he had an under 50% completion rate against him last season, and it's way over this year. And I think it's the knee, and I think he won't admit it. He pretty much said, I'm fine, but I think he's just being a football player and being a tough guy. I don't think he's been quite the same player since he hurt his knee in training camp. He's really impressive in training camp practices, before the knee injury, and spring practice against this excellent receiving core. And now he's fallen off. So maybe the bye week will do him some good. But yeah, they got to try some things. And you probably have to explore playing some younger players. Hopefully they'll get Tia Savea back. I think that would help a little bit. He's made plays when he's been out there. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. But yeah, it's grim on that side of the ball.
I'll be honest with you. Over the weekend, I had a moment where I'm like, what happened to this guy? What happened to that guy? Like, remember Tyler Martin, who was like a borderline 4-star linebacker coming in from the East Coast? I know he was a Don Brown recruit from Massachusetts, right? But he's a guy who's got elite middle size linebacker experience. Like, he's a true middle linebacker. He's as middle linebacker as it gets
on paper.
But yeah, I don't know what we're seeing in practice out of him. But we heard all great things about him.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard. We haven't asked anyone about this, but I've heard that they've moved him to edge rusher, kind of like what they did with Jeremy Mercer. So he might not have the ability to play in space that they're looking for. It's not easy to find these guys. And I think when you look at their recruiting class, and that was a big topic of conversation with Jed today, there are a lot of defensive players on there. There aren't a lot of linebackers on there.
Yeah.
So I think that's an area where they're going to go into the transfer portal and try to find a couple guys. At least someone who could step in right away and play middle linebacker for them next year. I think, as you survey the landscape, all the different positions, if there's a good quarterback, a really good quarterback who goes in, everybody wants them, right? Good offensive tackle, everybody wants them. Good defensive end, everybody wants them. In terms of the supply being a little greater, I think linebacker is a position where you can find somebody. And Johnny, he probably knows what he wants.
Yeah.
And so he'll be able to kind of handpick. He's got a lot of relationships with players. I think that's an area that they'll explore in the portal. I think their portal goals for this upcoming offseason, linebacker will be one, a defensive line, offensive line.
Yeah.
Which are, again, defensive linemen, offensive linemen, they're really hard to come by.
Yeah. Offensive line is definitely going to be harder to find in the transfer portal because all the who's who of college football, they're like, hey, we got all this great talent everywhere else, but all of our offensive linemen are all going to the NFL draft. We need to reload. And that's exactly what they do.
It's like if there are 5 good offensive linemen in the portal, there are 100 teams who want each of those guys.
Yeah.
So there's just a ton of competition for those players. Hey, can we talk about a positive development?
We talk about Jacob Manu and DJ Warnell.
How about T-Mac?
T-Mac, yeah. But see, that's
really
the thing,
good.
man. It's like a freshman like that who goes off. He had 7 catches, 132 yards, targeted 11 times.
2 touchdowns.
That one touchdown, they ruled it incomplete. And I'm like, oh, no, this is going to be like a Des Cottet situation, the Cowboys-Packers game from a few years ago. But they ruled it a touchdown.
Can I go on a brief tangent about that?
The refs were terrible.
Crew? Every initial call they made in that game was wrong. I mean, how do you blow the whistle and call that lateral a forward pass? Like, right away that's an obvious forward pass?
Yeah.
No. That's just wrong officiating mechanics. You let the play out. Now, there's one part of it I'm not sure about. Like, would it have been ruled a fumble and only, can another player advance a fumble on a 4th down? I don't know. It wasn't a fumble. I mean, it was just a pitch that one-hopped Jonah Coleman. But I don't know. I just felt like everything they did in that game was wrong. The mic was bad. Like, it was, I can't use the word to describe what it was like on our podcast, but yeah, it was that. So, and I heard that also that the USC-Utah game wasn't much better. So not a good weekend for Pac-12 officiating.
No.
But a good weekend for T-Mac.
No, T-Mac was spectacular, and we don't know yet at the time we're recording this podcast. He could be Pac-12 Freshman of the Week.
I mean, I'm a voter, and based on the other guys who are put up as candidates, I think he's going to win.
Okay.
And I think he's heading toward being the Pac-12 Offensive Freshman of the Year. Jaden Ott had that unbelievable game against Arizona and hasn't really done that much in other games. If T-Mac continues on the trajectory that he's on, I think he'll have a really good shot at it.
Absolutely. And, I think T-Mac is kind of setting himself up, obviously, for another great year. But as a sophomore, he's going to be kind of more Arizona's go-to guy because Jacob Cowing, we're all assuming he's going to the NFL draft, right? So that leads Dorian Singer. I mean, we don't know. How many years removed is he from?
He's a sophomore.
So he'll be a junior next year. So he's going to come back. But yeah, I think T-Mac has that number one option with, Dorian Singer is really setting up a good launching pad for next season. Yeah. And Jaden Delora is, getting smarter and smarter every single week. But I'm really curious. And, this is we'll cross that bridge when we get there because that's many podcasts from now. But the quarterback dynamic, if Jaden Delora comes back next season, you got Noah Fafita entering year 2, and then you got this gunslinger up in Colorado. I don't know if you saw this, Lev, but this past weekend, Braden Dorman.
8 touchdowns, right?
Some ridiculous like that, but he threw for over 500 yards. So they got this guy who's kind of your, prototypical pro-style quarterback. He's 6'4", just a big body. He's almost like Grant Gunnell, but this guy is just throwing for 500 yards. Well, Grant Gunnell threw for a lot of yards, but this guy's also really throwing it down the field. So I'm wondering how that dynamic is going to be like next season. I guess that's a good problem to have for Jedd Fisch.
Yeah, it is, and there's always a lot of movement at the quarterback position. And who knows? I mean, Jaden, his escapability is extraordinary, but you're always one play away.
Yeah.
And right now, Noah Fafita is one play away, and if I'm him, that's kind of my mentality. Just keep working on it. I mean, kind of probably worst case scenario, you're battling Braden Dorman for the starting job in 2024.
Yeah.
And back in my day, Justin, that's kind of how it always was. Like Mark Sanchez didn't play at USC until I think he was a redshirt junior. He basically started for 1 year, and then he entered the NFL draft. And guys had to wait. There wasn't all this transferring all the time.
Did he play behind John David Booty?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What a time that was.
Right. So, things were different back then. You had to wait it out, and we do see that on occasion. Max Duggan, guy at TCU, kind of waited it out, and it's doing really well down there right now. But you don't see it that often.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
All right, Lev, let's dive into the mailbag here.
Yeah.
Like you said, lots of
the Johnny Manson mailbag. Let's go.
All right, so Brad Malone asks, the Cats dominated SDSU and made huge stops at the end of the NDSU game. What has happened to the defense? And then he also added Machado Musgrove 2024. Big Padres fan.
Good one.
Brad Malone is. No, but good point. I mean, I think SDSU is also just having a down year this year.
Their offense is terrible.
They're just bad. But NDSU, yeah, I mean, they ran all over Arizona. Hunter Lipke had himself a night against the Arizona defense, but when it mattered most, they really dug down deep, made a stop, and that really showed the kind of grit that this team defense could have under Johnny Nansen. But since then, they just seem bogged down, and I think mentally and physically. And I think that
confidence is not great.
Bye week comes at a good time.
I think that you don't have to be great to win a lot of games in modern college football on the defensive side of the ball. You just have to be opportunistic. You have to come up with a handful of stops. That was the North Dakota State game. They came up with a handful of stops at the right time, and they won. One of the benefits or advantages that they had in the San Diego State game, no film on Johnny Nansen's defense, right? So everybody's seen it now. So there probably have to be some adjustments on that side of the ball. Johnny might need to enroll in his own football school here over this next week and a half and come up with a new lesson plan, if you will. But a lot of issues, and you can't really point to injuries because they haven't had that many injuries. I think that they haven't had as much depth as we thought they might. They have not gotten after the passer as well in recent games, and I think that's really impacting a lot of things. There have been games when they couldn't stop the run. I want to see defensive linemen winning some of these battles against offensive linemen, getting off blocks and affecting plays and making things easier on the linebackers in the run game and making things easier on the DBs in the pass game. To me, that's where it all starts.
Yeah. In losses this season, Arizona's averaging 27.3 points. So offense has really been doing their job this year.
Not bad.
Just, you got to do your job.
That's
defense.
10 points higher than their season average from last year.
Yeah.
They've already scored more points than they did last year.
Yeah. All right, our next mailbag question comes from Carl Hansen. He says, I believe the DC is supported by past Arizona football alum. Nothing is mentioned about their contributions. Can you give your perspective? Seems like there is plenty of experience the whole group brings to the table. So the alum he's talking about is Chuck Cecil and Ricky Hunley, safeties coach and defensive line
Teddy
coach.
Bruschi, I guess you could probably throw in there too.
Absolutely. I think safeties have, done about as good or maybe a little bit better than I thought. I thought, maybe Jackson Turner.
Christian Young has not made as many impact plays as I would have thought.
But I think Jackson Turner is better than last year. So it's kind of, a seesaw. It's like, oh, Christian Young isn't playing to our expectations, but man, Jackson Turner is playing way better than we thought last year.
Yeah, I'm sure that there are a lot of conversations that go on. I don't think that Johnny Nansen is operating in a silo here. I don't know this, but I'm pretty sure he's taking input from Dwayne Walker and Chuck Cecil and Ricky Hunley and all of the other defensive coaches. There's a lot of knowledge in that defensive staff room, and he'd be foolish to not take their input and take their feedback. And I know that everyone is mad at Johnny right now, and some people think that they should fire him halfway through his first season, which I think is borderline preposterous. You have to give him time, and I don't think it's fair to the players to do something like that because these guys have been through so much. I mean, Jalen Harris has played for how many different coaches over his 6 years here? I mean, he started with 6. Marcel Yates was his first coordinator, then Chuck Cecil, then Paul Rhodes, then Don Brown, now Johnny Nansen. That's 5 guys in 6 years.
And all the different position coaches.
And a different position coach almost every year, too. Yeah. So, Fish, hey, I wrote this in 5 takeaways. Fish values continuity. He's mentioned all the lack of staff turnover under Steve Spurrier. He just cited Lance Leipold having the same coordinators year after year after year. You got to give it some time.
Yeah.
I mean, if the defense is still this bad halfway through next year, I think we can revisit that topic. But for now, I think that's kind of ridiculous.
And I think the whole Don Brown situation last year, it was just awful timing for Arizona, right? Don Brown is the winningest coach in UMass history, or how
If that job didn't come open, Don Brown would still be here.
Yes. If
and
UMass did not
simple.
open,
Yeah.
he's not leaving Arizona for any other place. So that was just kind of a one-off deal, but
It was good luck to get him and bad luck to lose him.
no doubt. All right, let's move on to our next mailbag contribution. The Dude 1121, great name. He says or asks, do the Cats have anyone who starts on defense that could be drafted? CRW? I think Christian Rolla-Wallace could definitely be drafted.
Yeah, he would probably be at the top of the list. I thought coming into the year that maybe Keon Bars would be a candidate for that, but he just hasn't built off of last season. I mean, he doesn't have any sacks. Last year he had 5. Interestingly, in the initial round of grades, he was PFF's highest graded Arizona defender against Washington. So
wow,
there's probably a lot of stuff he's doing off the ball or doing the dirty work, absorbing double teams that like fall into what his responsibilities are.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say he's someone who could leave early to go into the draft. Hunter Eccles, maybe based on traits. Christian Young, maybe just because he's such a size speed guy, but I'd say Christian Rolla-Wallace is at the top of that list.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is going to come down to his 40.
Yeah.
I think he's got a lot of super high character traits, durable, good size, great character guy. How fast is he going to run? Because at cornerback, that's a really big deal in the NFL.
He's got huge shoulders.
He does.
And like a tiny waist. Like he's built like a superhero almost.
Yeah, I thought, from very early on, and we've discussed this, like I thought like long term that safety might be a better position for him.
Yeah.
But man, he's played really good at corner this year. Definitely their best and most consistent performer, I'll say that.
Keon Bars, though, I still think he could be drafted on day 3, of course, because even though his production has dropped off, I still feel like he could potentially be a better pro defensive lineman than Roy Lopez, right? That the one year that Roy Lopez was here during the COVID year, was he really noticeable in those games that he played for the Arizona Wildcats? I mean, the defense was bad just overall, but I didn't think Roy Lopez just really stood out. And I was honestly a little bit surprised he was drafted.
Yeah, I had good intel on that one that he would be. And it's a lot, with the NFL, a lot of it is traits. It's not so much production in college. It's like, how big are you? How fast are you? How twitchy are you? They're looking for kind of athletic upside. And I think Roy Lopez had that. And I'm not sure at this point whether Keon Bars does. Parrish Shand's another one who has the traits, whose production has really fallen off lately. Yeah. He didn't even have a tackle against Washington. So need to see more. Need to see more from those veteran guys on the front four. We've talked about that already in the podcast, and I think that's a theme that's going to be reiterated here over the next week and a half.
UA Cat asks, are they planning on redshirting Fafita? If so, did it make sense to play him for only a couple of snaps at the end and burn the second of his 4 games?
Yeah, great question. That was a situation where they had to kind of hurry someone into the game because Jaden got his ankle rolled and they didn't want to lose a timeout. And they don't have Jordan McLeod anymore. I don't know really what the status of Will Plummer is as far as readiness to go into the game. I mean, he and Gunnar Cruz are signaling in plays. They've got baseball caps on. So, you're at 2. They know what the number is with Noah. They're aware of it. I mean, if he had 3 games or 4 games already under his belt and they wanted to redshirt him, they might have had another plan in place. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I'm sure they're monitoring that situation and having those conversations.
You know who Gunnar Cruz looks like wearing that baseball cap on the sideline? Shane Falco.
Yeah.
Little Keanu Reeves replacements.
Totally. He is the stunt double. He is the stunt double for Keanu Reeves. There's no question. Maybe he'll be that in the next John Wick movie.
Really? Gunnar Cruz. Oh, man. All right. Joseph52 says, what do you guys expect the transfer portal to look like after the season in terms of players we will lose? It's inevitable, but hopefully won't be too detrimental.
Yeah, I don't know. That's always something of a mystery.
Will Plummer.
I don't.
would
Yeah.
probably say.
Okay. I don't want to speculate too much, but let's just look at a handful of players. I'd say Will Plummer is a strong candidate to leave. It doesn't seem like there's a path for playing time here. I'm sure he wants to play. He had that shoulder injury. Seems like he's okay now. Stevie Rocker is another one who played last year, hasn't played this year. He's young, talented. Could definitely see him landing somewhere else. Jamari Joyner, if he wants to keep playing ball, is another one who, again, like just hasn't found playing time here at Arizona. So I'd say those are a handful of guys who come to the top of my mind.
Yeah, Stevie Rocker would start at a lot of Mountain West programs.
Yeah.
Like Nevada, he would start.
Yeah. I like Stevie.
He's
like,
a good
got
he's
a good
player.
feel. He's got a really good feel for the game. Good pass receiver as well. I mean, just sometimes it happens. The only one guy can really play running back these days, the way football is. So, those are probably the three that jump to the top of my mind.
And also, don't they have another running back coming in for 2023?
Yeah, you always do. Always.
Brandon Johnson from Palmdale. Yeah, he's really good. All right, let's go to the mailbag once more. Or no, a few more times. We got one from Jordan Kuda. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Jordan asks, does the DC make it through the bye week? Yes, Johnny Nansen is the defensive coordinator after the bye week.
Yeah, if they were going to make that move, they would have announced it today or last night or something. Yeah. And as I said earlier, you got to give this a little bit of time. I mean, Jed, obviously, he handpicked Johnny Nansen and there were reasons that he did that. He liked his style of play. He liked his recruiting prowess. And again, I mean, how many different systems have they played? You know? And look, everyone's going to make the comparison to Don Brown. I've done it. We've done it. Don Brown is one of the most accomplished defensive coordinators of this century. I mean, he's turned around defenses everywhere. Like, he's elite.
And he's been around the block a lot of times as a play caller, defensive play caller.
He's super experienced. I mean, to expect to be able to just replace him, I mean, he's the most accomplished defensive coordinator hire that Arizona's ever had.
Yeah.
And he did a really good job last year under difficult circumstances. They also had some dudes who they lost who are pretty good players, like Trayvon Mason, Mo Diallo.
Mo Diallo's a huge loss.
Those two guys were grown men. Anthony Pandy, very experienced player, who's not going to make a ton of mistakes.
Imagine him next to Jerry Roberts.
Yeah, well, I've said this before too. Like, can you imagine if this team had Colin Schooler and Tony Fields? Man, they'd be a lot better.
Yeah,
those guys were really good. They would have made a huge difference. So they need to go find the next Colin Schooler and Tony Fields out there.
Taco Johnson.
Taco.
What's the deal with the
Monday.
secondary? It's Taco Monday, yeah. Well, depending on when you listen to it, you could be listening on Tuesday. It's perfect for you. Taco Johnson asks, what's the deal with the secondary? They seem to... every time I hear what's the deal, I always think of Pete Carroll. What's your deal? But, yeah, what's the deal with the secondary? They seem to be lost in coverage a lot. Is it not understanding responsibilities or talent level? And, hey... good pass coverage starts with good pass rush.
Yep.
Arizona's not getting that. So while the DBs, like, could they play better? Absolutely. I mean, Traydon Stukes, how many times was he targeted against Washington? It almost felt like they were picking on him. And I can't remember a time where teams were just really picking on one cornerback like they did against Traydon. So if Traydon can get healthier, Isaiah Rutherford, they can get him back and playing healthy, then I think DBs will be in a much better spot. But I also think, man, long term, you got to look at those guys behind him. Takario, Bobo Davis, Ephesians Prysock. The future is bright at cornerback with those two guys. Yeah.
DJ Warnell was the most targeted, according to Pro Football Focus, in the Washington game 12 times, 10 receptions in his coverage area. Traydon 10 times, 7 receptions in his coverage area. 2 touchdowns charged against Traydon. Like I said earlier, I don't think he's been quite the same since he hurt his knee. Hopefully the time off will help him in that regard. When you play a lot of zone, there are going to be holes if the quarterback has time to find them. And they've had way too much time to find those holes. And, there's some square peg round hole issues, I think, on this defense. Like DJ Warnell, I like his game a lot. I think he and Christian Young are very similar players. And I think DJ Warnell's best position long term is the position that Christian Young is playing right now. It's not that star kind of corner safety hybrid. It's more of this traditional strong safety. So they need to find someone who can play that spot, and they've got a lot of different candidates coming in this next recruiting class. So I think they're looking at it, safeties, star defensive backs, guys who can, play better in coverage in the middle of the field.
Got a lot of D linemen too. A lot of edge rushers coming in for 2023. All right, our last mailbag submission comes from M. Paz, and M. Paz asks, when do we begin to discuss that a loved former Wildcat isn't developing players as quickly as needed? Most D-line players showing regression. Is he the right man for the job? Let's talk about Ricky Hundley.
Yeah.
Arguably the best defensive player in program history. I thought at the time that it was great to have a guy like him because he's got coaching experience. He's a beloved former Wildcat. Him and Chuck Cecil, adding those two guys together, probably two of the most beloved Arizona defensive players not named Teddy Bruschi, to be a part of your staff. I think that the safeties have definitely shown a little bit of improvement under Chuck Cecil. As for the D-line, yeah, I mean, I would say that they've definitely regressed, but also at the same time, like we just talked about, Mo Diallo was such a good defensive lineman that you lose. And you only got him for a year. I can only imagine what he would look like in year 2 with Ricky Hundley and also with Johnny Nansen. So I'm not going to go ahead and start questioning Ricky Hundley until next year when I think Arizona's going to have a lot more depth up front.
I mean, look, those guys on the interior, we talked about it earlier in the podcast, have not been producing lately. So something's going on. Now, what I don't know is, are they being asked to do different things? Is Keon Bars being asked in this system or in the position that he's playing to absorb more double teams, to try to free other people up, as opposed to trying to just get into the backfield and disrupt plays? Is he playing more of a true nose tackle versus a 3 technique where you're shaded right off to the side a little bit? I don't have that answer. But I mean, I agree with the premise that, that group has been disappointing.
Yeah.
Those guys, they've got to start winning some of those battles and making plays. Now, are they being taught the wrong things? I don't know. I mean, when we talk to Ricky Hundley, he seems pretty knowledgeable about defensive line play, and it kind of remains to be seen. I don't see that as a change that will be made on the defensive staff because
continuity.
Fish goes way back with Ricky Hundley, and they wanted to work together for a long time. I don't know if there's going to be any changes that Fish makes. Now, could someone get plucked from the staff, like a Kevin Cummings, who might be viewed as like an up-and-coming, wide receiver coach who recruits really well? That's someone they're going to might have to fight to hang on to, because he's recruited really well. He's coached that group really well. Yeah, they may have to give him a little bump.
Yeah. Give him a little sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Hey.
Yep.
Take this money, be our wide receivers coach, and continue to bring T-Max to our program. How are you spending the bye?
You can never have too many T-Max, man.
How are you spending the bye week, Lev?
Well, I'm still going to be doing some work, not as much work. My sister's coming into town over the weekend, so it'll be nice to see her. Haven't seen her in a while. I don't think we have any youth baseball this weekend, surprisingly enough, which is an oddity, to be sure. My older son has a bunch of tournaments coming up, though, so that's cool. And I think I'm going to drop by High Corbett on Saturday to watch a little bit of the exhibition game that they're playing against UNLV. Got to see the baseball team a little bit in the Mexican Baseball Fiesta. Would like to see a little bit more.
They played Pima this past weekend.
They did. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
So it should be hopefully it won't rain. There is rain in the forecast on Saturday at this point, which is, again, unusual for Tucson. Weather's beautiful right now, so I can't think of anything I'd rather do than like maybe go for a bike ride, go for a walk, pop on the Wildcast podcast while I'm doing that, and just enjoy the nice weather we're having here in Tucson.
And you can listen to the Wildcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please, 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 cannot ask you enough to please subscribe, rate, and review.
Do we have any reviews?
We do.
You know, I some of the podcasts I listen to, they just read the reviews and talk about them on the air. So maybe that's something we could look into on a future pod.
So leave us a review on Apple if you got it, and also subscribe. Leave us a 5-star rating. And if you want to listen to the podcast while reading Michael Lev's work, my work, and all of our other coverage, go to Wildcaster app. Get all of our coverage there.
Yeah, one last thing. Since we don't have a second pod this week,
yeah,
we are going to still make Pac-12 picks. We'll post them either on our website or on Twitter or both, and then we'll give you an update on the standings when we reconnect next week.
Do we have to?
We do have to.
Standings. I'm not a big fan of the standings right now. But
you think I am? I think things are not going well over here either. Let me tell you.
Wildcast, subscribe, rate, review, download the Wildcaster app, and subscribe to all of our work on Tucson.com. Thanks for listening.